Hello, in this video I will be showcasing shaders and subgraphs. Shaders were the first thing that I developed on this project, mainly the faction map and how factions are drawn. I won't be able to showcase 100% of these shaders because I can't use the models or the textures of the game, so I will have the ability to only showcase basic information, but it should be enough. Every unit, every part, every arm, every attachment uses faction material and faction shaders, and there are of course scripts that changes the faction color. For example, player A will be green, player B will be blue, and so on, based on the factions that are within the faction information screen. That's pretty much it. Now I will start from subgraphs. So the basic is the SMO subgraph. It was designed to actually simplify smoothness, metallic, occlusion, textures. So for example, red channel is for smoothness, green channel for metallic, and blue channel for occlusion. It separates each other, it multiplies by the value given, and it just returns the SMO output. SMO blend essentially takes SMO A and SMO B and blends it based on the mask. Unit texturing is also very simple. It just takes the texture, it takes the color, and it takes the mask as well as a faction color. We will start with the mask, just to know where faction color needs to multiply the texture color. And we handle all here. And then once we know which part of the mask is faction color, we multiply with the faction color itself, and we just add the values and output the color. Unit texturing skin subgraph is actually the same as unit texturing, but a bit more advanced, as there is an additional skin mask that has to ignore and interact with faction colors as well as faction textures. It removes the faction texture. For example, we want some part of it to be lava texture moving inside of the unit, so that's where the additional skin is used for. Unit emission is just which parts of the unit has emission. And there's faction emission as well as basic emission. Basic emission emits the selected color, while faction emission emits the color that is the faction color. Let's start with the faction basic. This is the map, and this is the texture. I changed the texture because I just can't show the texture. The map was developed by me, so it's all okay on that part. This is how the mask starts off. Similar how SMO, one single texture which is responsible for smoothness, metallic, occlusion. The faction map is also one single texture. This is the basic faction, so we can see that R represents where the faction color will be placed. The G is the place where emissions will be placed, and of course if red and G color are on the same position, then it will paint the faction emission color instead of faction emission basic. The blue is where unit texturing skin mask would be. So essentially it would be a place where the texture would be, this texture would be replaced with another texture instead, and that texture would be colored and emitted by the rules of the shader. This is just responsible for texturing. This is the emission part as well as the mask. This is the dissolve. All factions have dissolve. Dissolve state is pretty basic. You can pretty much 0 and 1. There are colors, edge, size, dissolve state, noise scale, etc, etc. All other parts are calculation, and this is normal map. This takes basic metallic smoothness occlusion and not via texture. This one is responsible for the SMO texturing. We also have the skinned one, but it's a bit of a mess. Normal map is a bit advanced, a lot of emissions are custom, and just skin texturing simplified, but it's a bit complex. There are a few other shaders that I have developed, but I'm not gonna show the shader graph because they're pretty similar to faction shader. But I'm still gonna show you how they look within the scene, as they have a few differences on how they behave. Firstly, this object. I can show this object because the object's models are from Cinti, and I developed the design as well as the texture here. This has the shader. It has, of course, the coloration, which is based on faction that it belongs to, edge colors, and of course the edge size. And this thing can have multiple textures of animating based on times. And of course it has, you can select different tilings, different speeds, movement, direction, and so on and so forth to create this kind of force field. Also it has dissolve, just like everything, but this dissolve goes from top to bottom, like this. And the edge has a bit of a coloration, so you can create an interesting type of dissolve. Another shader that we have is player spawn banner, and that same shader would work showing health. So I'm just gonna show how it works here. I'm not gonna explain why there are 3 of these because of gameplay reasons, but you just select the type of texture you want to draw as well as the state, and you can create a cutout of that shader. So you can create, for example, the manner transitioning, how it transitions. In this type, it transitions like this. You can also declare emissions and so on and so forth. Now I will show how this looks in the game. As stated previously, I won't be able to showcase the full power of the shader, but I will be able to at least show how factions are actually colored. So there's a lot of systems that each object has, but the main one currently that needs to be focused on is the color switch manager. All behaviors have this color switch manager, which the main system unit behavior loads during its activation. Now the color switch manager just requests the colors, and that's it. Everything else it does itself. So for example, it has the references to these scripts. If I click on the body pivot, it has the color switch children, which a script essentially knows that it contains a child with a color switch manager. So, and it activates the color switch manager with the values that it originally contained. This is because every part also has color switch manager as it's a separate script, and it also needs to know how many parts do I need to actually color in. And then there's a color switch renderer, which is essentially the same abstract script with, as the color switch children. You can have as many scripts like this as you want. The color switch renderer is more complex, but it essentially what kind of color do you use? You can have as many colors as you want. For this game there were two possible colors in the faction info, as you saw in previous video, for example green and lime. So what color this faction part represents? How do we switch? Essentially, do we override colors or so on? Is it an emission? Because we need to color in emission faction color as well, and this is just the name of the material, how intense we want it to be, and so on. For example, this color is the main one, this overrides the secondary colors if the faction has actually lit the secondary values, otherwise it's ignored. And that goes for all parts. Head has color switch children, then it color switch manager, which has the color switch children, and it overrides the renderer, which then has all of these values, and so on and so forth. This can be anything essentially, and this system can support other kinds of materials, other kinds of systems. It's a separate entity. It has, of course, the assembly. Another thing that the abstract color switcher allows is the ability to simply randomize color for debugging purposes. And as the color switcher works on the abstract class, I can actually change parts based on the one that I'm activating. And this allows to see it a bit more clearer on how it works. That's about it for shaders. Thanks for watching.